Talking about boring documents like the soup list, we can talk about the next boring document, which is almost as useless as the soup list, but not quite. It's maybe 5% useful, so not quite 0% like the soup list. And that's the software development and maintenance plan. Again, this is in the regulators' point of view. It's kind of like software is developed in a way where a large group of people comes together, I don't know, wearing suits or whatever in a dark room, and then they come up with a plan. They plan stuff like, yeah, we'll create this like extremely stupid Gantt chart and we'll have like clear milestones, and then the software will be developed, whatever, in 2 years it'll be done with certain milestones. And we kind of like know in the meantime that the world has kind of like moved on and has found out about like agile software development, among other things, and that deadlines in software development often actually don't work and you need slightly other structures. However, this of course is not part of the 62304 because it's still based on the knowledge 20 to 30 years ago. All right, so the idea here is that you have to create a document called software development plan, and that's what we're going to look at next. How does this work? So let's see. If you go to our website and look at the 62304 templates, we can look for the software development maintenance plan, this one, and it's a document. So again, as always, you have two choices of how to actually do this. We have this free template on our website, as always. So you could just copy paste this to Google Docs or Google Sheets if you're using that sort of tool, or like Confluence if you're using other software. Supposedly they call it software. Or you could use Formwork, which of course saves you, as always, a lot of time and effort. And I'm going to show you how it works in Formwork. So as this is part of your product documentation, you want to save it to the product section in Formwork and to the record section. Now, we of course have this slightly smarter way of copying things. So we go to QMS, open regulatory templates, technical documentation, and then we'll be looking for the development and maintenance plan, this one. Then you do create new record using this as a template. Then I'm going to copy this to our test depression app and already start filling it out. And while filling it out, I'll explain it to you. And again, not all of this is very useful, but we generally keep our templates very minimalistic, so it just contains the bare minimum you need for your medical device regulatory compliance. As you can see in the top section, we always have this table where it shows which sections comply with which section of the standard. So for example, you have the standard section 511, and then you can see, hey, cool, that's fulfilled in document section 1, and this is this section. And then on the left side, you also have this column about, if you remember, the 62304 classes. So not all sections are required for all classes. So for example, if you're class C, then you're screwed because this template doesn't cover this section for class C. So you might have to read the standard yourself. Good luck. Or if you're class A, which is unlikely, but still possible, you could actually go ahead and probably even delete some of the sections. As you see, these sections only are required for classes B and C. All right, with that out of the way, let's just assume we're B because it's usually the case, and most of these, if you're B, essentially you have to fill out the whole template, so that makes things quite easy. I just go through it rather quickly because in my consulting experience now, 5 years later, before I first recorded this video, our customers actually tend to not have a lot of problems with this template because a lot of it is like self-explanatory, and you also have even explanatory text with examples in there. So one of the things is you have to document the resources which are required for your software development, in that case your team. So there's really no huge surprises there, like your different roles, the count of people and responsibilities. As a quick side note, in the past we used to mention people by name here. Nowadays we don't do that because that keeps things more flexible. Otherwise, as soon as someone leaves, you might have to go ahead and update documents in your regulatory compliance documentation, and that would suck a lot. Like if a backend person leaves and you put the name of the person here, that's, I guess, not the most efficient approach. If you're hiring another backend person instead, again, just keep it around here. Then here, this is actually the area where you define your safety classification based on the 62304. So again, we have classes A, B, and C. And here, you kind of like mention which class you're going for and with which reasonings. You already have like some text examples here, so I won't really go into detail that much. A few other things: measuring function, combination with other products in your product lifetime. Again, just read the text and you'll probably be fine, or send us a message if you have questions. You have to list your programming languages. So as an example here, we're using Python with version 3.8. The template's kind of old actually. Also, your development software like PyCharm version 2020. Yeah, it's been a while. And your target runtime. And again, target runtime in many cases is kind of like different than the actual language. Like Python is the language, and then you have CPython, which is the runtime. And then you could also add like stuff like system requirements for running your software. And if you're like in our depression app example, you might have two runtimes, right? You have like the app, which is running on mobile phone, so you might want to define minimum system requirements for that. And you have your backend, which runs on your infrastructure or cloud infrastructure, and you might have different infrastructure, different requirements for that. And always beware of over-engineering. Always keep things simple. So if you're targeting mobile phones with your mobile app, don't go ahead and list all possible mobile phones where you can install the app on. Just kind of like list the minimum requirements, like for example, CPU requirements, or specifically for mobile apps, you have like the target SDK versions for Android and iOS, where essentially the mobile phone needs to have a certain minimum operating system version essentially to run your app. And that's what I would mention. And basic stuff like, okay, does it need a camera? Does it not need a camera in the mobile phone? Those are your requirements. All right. And then this is completely crazy. So the ISO 13485, so the standard for quality management, it requires you to specify design phases. In my experience, startups never work with design phases like this, like 30 years ago. So I would so here's an example, and just kind of like, I don't know, like, I mean, nowadays we have ChatGPT, so add, like, if you have design phases, great, like describe them here. If you don't, come up with something which sounds plausible and maybe use it in your development, maybe not. And then then here is crazy. This is a regulatory requirement. You have to avoid common software defects based on selective programming technology. So just read the text here. So for example, if you have a programming language like Python, which is, what do you call it? Like loosely typed. Anyway, it's not like strictly typed. Those might pose risks, but then you kind of like add testing for that instead. So you're still fine. Yeah, the example text here is like pretty good. And then here you describe how you use version control, how you use Git. That actually is useful because you do have some sort of process. Every startup has some sort of process how you develop software, in the sense of like, you're probably using Git, you're probably using GitHub, you probably have some sort of like process for using pull requests, and do you merge them, or do you squash and merge? And that's kind of like what you describe here. So this is actually a useful section in this template. All right. Another useful section, like what do you expect your developers to document alongside your development. A lot of this is just kind of like boilerplate, even more boilerplate, and then even more. So that's kind of that's kind of like all there is. Long story short, again, this document, don't spend too much time on it because the explanatory text is pretty good. In many cases, it already has the content, and you just like use the content, and you're fine. So that's pretty easily done. As a quick side note, you have the software and development and maintenance plan. You have to write that for each of your products. I mean, most startups just have one product, so you write this just once. Formwork does, so if we save it now, Formwork does save this in your release records, so it's saved alongside your product stuff, like software requirements and tests and so on. And as with all records, Formwork copies this over to the next release when you create the next release. So when we will be creating version 0.2 here, then Formwork will copy over the software development and maintenance plan. And from experience, this is not a document you have to update very often. I mean, you saw the content, so unless, for example, your resources are really changing a lot and you need to update that, yeah, sure. Or if you're suddenly targeting a different programming language, okay. But in most cases, you write this document once and you only do very minor changes. For most releases, you can probably just use the copied document from Formwork and just kind of like leave that as it is and release your software. So that's pretty good. It's pretty simple, but it's also a somewhat important document because auditors tend to look at it among other things. Alright, let's hope that the next video isn't as boring as this one, but I don't have high hopes. Anyway, thanks for watching and see you in the next video.